Welcome back everybody, this is Grace, and today I'm going to talk about the recent update which gave us two LTS shop updates, the Sharks and the Olympax LTS. There's been some other stuff happening too, but to be honest, my Wi-Fi has been the shakiest it's ever been, so I haven't been able to do much content creation. With that said, I'm going to very quickly go through the Shark Week shop. We've got these three weapons, which give an accuracy trigger on bleed. They're pretty bad, but look beautiful. Shark Skewer is a ranged weapon which gets 2x LS damage if the foe is bleeding. And we've got the Tokens Shark Saber, which is a melee weapon which gives 20 bleed potence and inflicts about power 0.3 bleed every turn for basic attacks, and it trades weapon damage to do that. Very efficient for bleed setups, very nice. If we look in the miscs, we've got the Shark Jaw misc, which gives you damage to water monsters and defense against water monsters. Quite nice. And there's also the Shark Attack Helm. It makes your water pets and guests bleed the foe. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's a bleed item for sure. We've got, I believe, 3 pets here. Hammerhead Shark gives you 20 bleed potence. These two just do normal damage. I'm pretty sure. Like 95% positive. The paintings, we've got the LTS painting, of course, but we've also got the Zardnado, which lets you access a boss. People used to use this for gold farming, less so nowadays, to my understanding, with the void paintings and whatnot, but good to know about. It also has a temporary bleed guest from killing the boss, so you may want to know about that. And then finally, this year, these are the 2 new items. Bloodthirsty Sharkicane, Ravenous Sharkicane. They look identical. Exact same animation, but the difference is the Ravenous one is a fragile spell. It's a fragile spell based off the foe's water resistance. It's at a -20 save, super strong, super good for doing water damage. It's also 4 hits, a handy water spell. I think we've got a lot of great water spells. Definitely one to keep your eye on if you like using fragile to get around boss damage caps. I'm actually not a fan of fragile as a way to deal damage generally. I've run some numbers, I've run some tests. I think unless you have a very restrictive damage cap, Fragile's not going to be better than a normal damage spell most of the time. But hey, everyone has their own preference. It certainly does have some strong use cases. Now you'll notice it's only MP cost. There is no SP version for either of these spells, which is a bummer since they're cool. But the Bloodthirsty one, as you can see by the description, eats blood, consumes blood on the foe to heal you. So it'll eat up to 400% melee in blood to heal you for 400% melee. Now what is that in bleed? We're going to talk about bleed eating later, and probably it's going to get its own video, but we'll get to that later. So in short, we got the new items are a fragile spell and a bleed eating heal spell. This one still does damage, the bleed eating is just totally separate from the damage. Alright. So that being said, let's close out of here and go to the Lore Olympian Games. We got the Olympian Torchfoot, which is a fire pet which eats panic to do up to 3x its normal damage. Very handy. We love to have a panic eater pet. Also, I love the Torchfoot. I kind of love the old art too. I would have loved if they had a retro version, but hey, artists got stuff to do. They're busy people. I ain't bothering, and this is beautiful. I'm definitely going to be picking up this pet myself. Some fun setups to go with it, I'm pretty sure, but I haven't thought about it too hard yet. But I'm a big fan of this pet. Definitely a good pickup. Now, the weapons are the Chromatic Olympax Pulverizer. Now, the Chromatic Olympax Pulverizer is available in the LTS, but there should be, and there are, excuse me, 8 elemental variants in the Olympax shop, the one you access on the actual Paxia Islands, and I'll just go over there while I talk. But by doing the Olympax quest, which is a short quest, 4 monsters and then a very weak demi-boss, but you access it right here. Inside that quest shop, there are 8 elemental variants, but this one is a chromatic one. We'll talk about the 8 elemental variants first, because they're in order in the info subs, no real reason. But what they do is they deal 25% reduced damage, and in the champion mode, they damage monster SP. They do about 105 damage per turn, unless I have made a miscalculation. So it's a significant chunk out of the monster's SP, so very strong for that. The pulverizer mode is a panic, which should be a 23 roughly % panic. It's a main stat versus charisma infliction, so pretty nice. And the magic weapon is 3/4 the power of the melee in range. That being said, those items are tokens, which is a bummer, but they're really good, so makes sense. I think these are really strong panic weapons. The panic also does multiply by monster resistance, if I remember correctly. So really strong options for panic on the weapon slot. Definitely something to look out for, because we don't have too many panic weapons. We have a few, but not a ridiculous amount or anything, so definitely a good option. And the SP damage is also a very nice option in the weapon, because we really don't have that much SP damage free to play available. I mean tokens, so but Underwormling and not much else. Nemesis dodge FSB, but or not FSB, but dodge toggle. Anyways, now we're at the chromatic one. The chromatic one is you pay SP and damage, and you can toggle to do that. So you pay SP and damage if you toggle, and you do a chromatic corruption. And this one, unlike some of the other ones, is also harm and void. So it's the 8 normal elements, harm and void, and you heal equal to the damage dealt. Its main stat versus endurance save, nothing too crazy. Also, you have a 10% chance to prismatically burn your foe for 4 turns because of the 0 proc bonus on the weapon. So pretty handy stuff, pretty cool stuff. Also, the element randomly is not between just all 8 elements, but also harm and void. So that makes it different from other random element weapons. But aside from that, nothing much else in this shop. There's some pretty faces, which I will show you very quickly. I'm a fan of actually a lot of them, to be honest. I maybe losing some tokens this season, we'll see. But what I want to do next is actually show off a couple of setups for the bleed eating for mages. Now there's a lot of ways to stack a bleed for mages. There's in fact like a million ways. But first thing to know is that against combat practice trainer, because it's reduced level, the bleed eater will always eat the maximum amount of bleed possible. So the amount a bleed eater gets out of a bleed, let's say you have a power 1 bleed on Akraloth and a power 1 bleed on Queen Rachel the Sunray. You might get a different amount of value from eating each of those power 1 bleeds. And the amount of value you get out of a bleed depends on 2 things, basically. Your stats, well, actually 3 things. Your level versus the monster level. So that's where it goes wrong with combat practice trainer. I'm level 150, it's level 60, so I get a 55, I believe, advantage to the roll. Because of that 55 advantage, I get the maximum amount of bleed eating. Then the next thing that you check are your stats. If, let's say I use 74th Law, that's an intellect versus endurance save. My intellect is 250, his is 50, my luck is 250, his is 50, so I'm winning the major and the minor. That gives me a 20 plus 10, 30 advantage. The 20 comes from the major, the 10 comes from the minor. If you don't know too much about status rolls, this might be pretty confusing for you, but basically, if you're winning your stat rolls by a lot, your bleed is worth more to eat. And then finally, if your item has a built-in negative save to its bleed, like for example, Undead Knight Minion Helm when it's equipped on the Necromancer armor, the Ninja Lawyer Assassins has a -10 save, and the Bound Grenwog has a -20 save, and I believe the 74th Law has a -20 save, but let me double check that real quick. Yep. So 74th Law also has a -20 save, so I think Ninja Lawyer Assassins only has -10. If I remember correctly. No, it is -20. I think. No, it's -10. Either way. So, it takes into account your level. If you have a level advantage, your bleed is going to be worth more to eat. If you have a stat advantage, your bleed is going to be worth more to eat. If you have a save roll advantage, your bleed is going to be worth more to eat. And obviously, all the opposite is true also. If you're lower level, your bleed's going to be less valuable. If you have loser stats, it's going to be less valuable. If you have a weak status roll, like a +10 or a +20, it's going to be worth less to eat. That being said, you might be thinking, does status potency affect the roll? It does not. Shout out to Draco for testing a lot of this, but I was pretty sure ahead of time. Either way, always good to test stuff in-game to make sure it's working correctly. But status potency does not affect the amount it's eaten, no matter what. So just to TLDR, level, stat rolls, and item save roll. That is what affects how much you eat. You can get a maximum of 4 times the bleed power as percent melee. So if I inflict, let's just go to town with this setup. We've got the guest on bleed, the pet on bleed, a bleed spell. This item gives me bleed on my basic attack spells and my pet attacks. So we get a power 1.268. Because we have that massive level advantage, we're getting the maximum eating power. So we're getting 4 times the bleed. So you could eat what's 2.68 times 4? About 500% melee to eat. So if we use this bloodthirsty Sharkicane that eats only 400% melee, we should be left with 2.68 power left. But I'm going to unequip Undead Night Minion Helm, Bound Grenwog, and 74th Law, just so we can be sure. We should be left with 0.268 left. And we are. There we go, so that's the science. You can get a maximum of 4 times the bleed value. You get a minimum of 1 times the bleed value. Maximum of 4 times the bleed value. Now, it's easy to get 4 times the bleed value as an eat on Combat Practice Trainer, but what I'm going to do next is try and show you how you can make sure you're getting that 4 times bleed. And where am I going to go? I think we're going to go to Tibbles. Tibbles just seems like a handy place to go. So if we look at Tibbles, there's a couple. Well, first I have to make sure I don't die. Light armor, light shield, we're good. So just a moment. So I told you about all those factors that affect how much your bleed is worth. Now I'm going to get into the numbers. If your bleed has a 50% chance of success, then the bleed eat you'll get is 2 times the bleed. So if your bleed is expected to last 2 turns, you'll get 2 times the bleed value. So you'll get a power 1 bleed will be worth 200% melee. If your bleed save roll is 25 advantage to you, you'll get 4 times the bleed value. If it's 30 advantage, you still get 4 times. It's capped at 4 times. So basically, when you're eating bleed, your goal should be to make sure you have a 20 advantage at all times, or 25 advantage at all times, because then you'll get 4 times your input as output for your eater effect. Is that kind of busted? Most assuredly so, but that's a topic for another video, which I'm not going to worry about right now. There we go, we're going to inflict bleeding wounds, should be all good there. I don't think that's at a plus 10. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do this because of another quirk of how bleed works. Don't worry about it. Basically, you can't use non-negative bleed saves with negative bleed saves and have them stacked together. Don't worry about it at the moment. But what I'm going to do is, I know my Ninja Lawyer Assassins is Charisma versus Endurance, Luck versus Luck. So they will have a 20 advantage. Because I will a 22.5 advantage before the save roll. So just from the stats, I'll have a 22.5 advantage. Then they have that minus 10 save, so that takes it to 32.5. That's greater than 25, so I know I'm all set. I'll get 4 times the eating power off of them. Then I go to Bound Grenwog. I know again this is Charisma versus End, Luck versus Luck. Charisma versus End, I get a 20 advantage. Luck versus Luck, I get a 2.5 advantage. And then of course, I have that minus 20 save roll built into the Bound Grenwog. So I'm at 42.5, I think. So that's greater than 25 of an advantage towards the player. So I get that 4x multiplier on its bleed. All of your bleed sources have to have this 4x multiplier, or else they'll all go to the weakest multiplier. That's just how bleed works. I think I could have made a video about bleed before this, but I wanted to cover the release. It's a shame. Undead Night Minion Helm, that bleed is at a minus 20 save if and only if you're in the Necromancer class armor. I don't know if you need the title. I guess I'll actually find out now, because I might change it. But it's main stat, weapon main stat versus endurance, luck versus luck. So again, I've got 300 int versus 0 endurance. That's a 20. 2.5 on the luck advantage, 250 versus 225. 2.5 advantage, and then the minus 20 save, 44. 74th law as we went over, intellect versus endurance, minus 20 save, same difference. Basically what I'm saying is all of my sources are gonna pump numbers that give me a greater than 25 advantage on my bleed roll. I've also got the bleed potency shield. That's just to make sure it all inflicts. I think all of my sources are above 30 advantage, so they should all inflict every time. Okay, so I did in fact get obliterated, Jeepers Creepers, by the flamethrower, but we're not worried about that. What we're hoping to see, if I didn't mess this up, is that we will eat 1 power from the bleed. So there'll be 0.118 left. And so let's see what heals, but before we do that, this healing is just a spell hit, so it's boosted by all the stuff that would normally boost spells. So I'm going to use an additive booster, quad mod. You don't actually have to do this, there's a lot of things you could do, but I'm also going to use the spiritual amplification. I don't have the spellcaster lean, but that doesn't affect healing anyways, so no big deal. And I could use something like Silas Staff or Oath of Desire, but no need to do that. But basically what I'm saying is, because I used a lot of bleeds, 1 with a positive stat roll for me, because this guy has 0 end, and 2 with negative stat rolls built in, negative save rolls built in, I should get a 4x bleed eat out of this cure. So if there's 0.118 left, then that means we got it. We got that 4x multiplier, so you can get these against boss monsters. Now, let's see if we still get that against a monster with endurance. So I'm going to go to Queen Rachel in the tower, and I'm fighting all these light monsters for some reason. I really should have planned this better, but no big deal. Final challenge, bring it on. Light monsters. Now Queen Rachel has endurance but no luck, so it'll be harder to win the major roll for all my bleeds, which are the most important, but easier to win the minor roll. Alright, so Champion Holy Avenger, I've already got Love Struck Shield. Alright, now I go back to Commander's Obsidian. I've got Undead Knight Minion Helm, and I'm just going to use Essence Orbit. No real reason. Okay, so if we check our math here, I know all of my saves are either Charisma or Intellect versus Endurance, and then Luck versus Luck. So I'm winning that 10 minor roll, and I'm winning the Intellect at 300. So I'm getting 75% of the major roll, which is 15, and all of the luck minor roll, which is 10. So that's actually it. That should be it. In fact, I shouldn't even need to use the Necromancer armor, even if I get one on a +0 save from this gear, from not having in the Necromancer armor. I should get a 4x bleedy. Let's see. Okay, so we're powering 998. You know what? That's close enough. If the bleed all goes away, that means we got the 4x power. If it doesn't all go away, that means that we didn't quite get the 4x power. But I'm pretty sure we did. Yep. All the bleed went away, meaning we got the 4x power. So even against monsters with endurance, you can still totally get the 4x power on your bleedy. You just have to make sure to use sources where 1, you win the major and minor roll, or 2, you have a strong negative save. Now, a couple of ways you can increase your odds of winning the major and minor roll are 1, boosting your main stat. Let's say this guy has 250 endurance. Well, I'm using a Mist that gives me +50 intellect. If I have the Commander's Obsidian, well, if I have the Spell Slingers, I can boost my intellect further with the toggle built into the armor. Or perhaps I could use a stat drive shield to boost my main stat further. I could also use a Charisma shield if I were worried about my pet and guest save rolls to boost that Charisma up by 50. I could even use the Purple Rain, which gives a free, temporary, +57 Charisma boost. I could have sworn it used to be different. I'm not going to worry about that right now though. If you're worried about your minor roll, A lot of people don't really use it for this, but Time Killer actually gives you a temporary 50 luck boost. So let's say this guy had 225 luck and I really needed to win that minor roll more. Now I have, instead of just 250 luck, I have 299. So I'm winning that minor roll by 7.5, not just 2.5. So there's lots of ways to manipulate your stats, and let's see if we can use one of those ways against a monster with both endurance and luck. Okay, I've been scrounging around the game looking for a guy with intellect and endurance, and I'm like, God Scourge Destroyer, 16,000 HP. Surely this will fit the bill. No endurance, just luck. Crazy. Crazy. Alright, so I didn't find a monster with endurance and luck, but I found a monster with greater than average endurance. This guy's endurance is because of his temporary buff. It's 225 plus 115, which comes out to 340. So he's actually beating the major roll by 95%? 90%? Yeah, 90%. So he's getting a plus 18 on advantage to my bleed roll at base. He's also going to 2-hit me, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. So let's go to our commander Necromancer and just see what we can do. Love Struck Defender is going to help us inflict, but it's not going to help the Eater valuation. What I'm also going to do is just grab a quick Shadow Feeder Pendant turn. Just think it might come in handy so I don't get one banged. And let's get Ninja Lawyer Assassin out and Bound Grenwalk. So we already know that these guys use Charisma versus Endurance. His Endurance is 340, like I said. My Charisma is only 300 because of the Armored Stat Drive toggle. So I need a further boost to my Charisma to get these guys competing with the major roll. So I'm going to do Purple Rain, like I showed you. Now I'm at 357 Charisma, he's at 340. So my major roll is going to be 17 advantage, which is basically 1/5, which is basically 4. So I've got like a 3.8 advantage on the major roll. If I use Undead Night Minion Helm, that gives me further charisma, so that gives me 50 more charisma, so now I have 407 compared to his 340, so that's a 65 advantage, which comes out to 7 advantage on the major roll. That's not great, but we've got 10 from luck, and we've got 10 from the -10 save on Ninja Lawyer Assassin, 20 from here. So these two are now at a 27 and 37 save roll advantage. So these two will give me the max 4x bleedy. Now if we look at what I'm going to be doing, I am in a Necromancer armor. I have 300 intellect because of my mist, and I'm going to be casting a intellect versus endurance save spell. So he has 340, I only have 300. Even if I were in Spellslinger, I wouldn't have a full major advantage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Arcane Amplification. Now this is a package, so I'm pretty much cheating, but there's also the Underworld Tome, which is a token tome, which I highly recommend everyone who's a mage player and does not have Arcane Amplification pick up, because it boosts your intellect significantly. Another thing you could do is use the Tenebrophage weapon, which is gold cost, and it eats Panic to boost intellect. It boosts intellect and strength, but you can use it to boost intellect. You can use Panic with your Werepire subrace, which many mages tend to use, or you can use another source of Panic. There are lots of options. But basically, I'm giving myself a temporary intellect boost. Arcane Amplification is the easiest way and the most powerful way, but Underworld Tome and Tenebrophage will also work, as well as a Stat Drive shield, because I don't think I'll actually need the Potency shield in the end. But with that being said, now I have 405 int compared to 340, so again I'm at a 17, just about 16, 17 advantage. Well, no, not quite. Yeah, no, 14 or so. 405 versus 340, that's a 65 advantage. 6.5 out of 10 times 2, 13 advantage. I'm winning the luck for 10, and of course my save rolls are negative, so I should be getting maximum bleed eat out of this. So I just realized, first of all, we can't see the bleed, it's 0.74. Second of all, I can't get the bleed built up because I'm using my pet and guest to do it. So I need to wait a turn. So I'm gonna drink a potion and just hope he doesn't one-shot me. If he does, that's gonna be super anticlimactic. Not even a problem. Light work, no reaction, as they say. Alright. So now we've got 1.717 bleed. If all goes well, I should get 0.717 left over. 0.717 left over. So even against a boss with 340 endurance, I was able to boost my stats and use items with built-in negative save rolls to get that 4x Bleed Eater output. So what I'm saying is, Bleed Eating is really good. If you're careful with your setup, you can always get a 4x output on the Eater. Well, it's not actually 4x, it's 2x, or 2x compared to what you'd normally be getting, because normally you'd get a 2x output just from having the bleed there. But anyways, that is how I like to eat bleed instead of bleed on my mage. There's lots of ways to stack bleed. There's lots of ways to make sure you're getting that 25 save roll advantage, and that will give you your Eater's 4x output. Thank you guys for watching. This one went kind of in depth without as much explanation. I plan to do a deep dive on how bleed eating and bleed works in a later video. If you'd like to see that, let me know. That being said, spread some peace and love, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.